$1,200. They do cut the registration off at 1,200 attenders, and it always sells out. So if you're interested in going, do get signed up as soon as possible. We would love to have you go along. Yes. Oh, and we are raffling off a ticket to the Indiana Bee School in our raffle tonight, so you can even win it for $1. So that is great. I also have a resource list of bees that will be coming available. Oh, there's a beginner track at the Indiana Bee School. That is something that new that they started last year. So you may go to the Indiana Bee School and sign up for the beginner track, where you'll spend all day going to beginner classes. There's also concurrently the rest of the bee school, which is all these guest speakers and workshops. So you'll pick one or the other when you sign up. That is totally up to you. So the Beekeeping 101 tonight and next month. Next month is not a repetition of what goes on tonight. If you enjoy it and you want to come back, next month will be new topics and new teachers. So it's better. Well, John, we don't want to go there, but it will be better. But so next month would be a continuation of our Beekeeping 101 class. And this is a list of all the things that we have going on. I won't go through the whole thing. Barry, do you want to talk about your
the packages?
ordering? Yeah, your package order.
We sent information out, so you should have got some info on packages. They're from a fellow in Kentucky. All we are is just the transportation. So we're doing them for $120, and sometime mid-April we had to get at least 10 packages to get the deal for $120 for a package of bees.
We're over it.
We're over it? Okay. So.
And this will not be your last opportunity to order packages. It's just an opportunity.
Yeah, just an opportunity, because I'm driving to his place anyway to pick equipment up, and I thought if I'm there, I might as well bring a truckload of bees back. So,
what kind are
Italians?
honey?
They're honeybees. they're Italians.
From where?
From Georgia.
From the dam?
No, I get them from Jim Koss down in
And he does
Moorhead.
create the packages. He actually makes
He goes
the packages.
he goes down and shakes them in Georgia on Thursday and Friday, drives them back. So they've only been in a package a couple days when we pick them up.
And
That's
that
what
was
he
one
tells
of the
me.
reasons that Barry felt comfortable buying from him before and is now repeating that.
So if you want them, they're taking money back there, and I have to put the order in. So if you're interested.
Yes. And we have another gentleman here who has a little announcement. You will have packages or news. Can you tell us?
Yeah, we are not to interfere with the club doing.
Oh, not at all. There's plenty of availability, so.
We're gonna try and introduce the Carnelian bee to this area, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Also, what's the other?
That's what we're bringing from Ray Alvarez in California.
Oh, okay.
Ray Alvarez.
Yeah, Oliveras honeybees in Northern California.
And we're gonna go out and get a pickup load of news and bring them back. And because we're gonna start doing queens, and we want a good, we have several, we bought a half a dozen queens last year.
Okay.
And they're just laying like crazy. So evidently they're a little better bee than what the Georgia and Indiana bee is.
So when and how much?
I don't know for sure because we haven't had them long enough, but it looks like they're really gonna do good. And we're gonna have it, we're gonna add $20 to what Ray Alvarez charges for our expenses. We're hoping to sell enough to get half of our expenses.
I understand. So when will that happen?
April 6th, we pick them up, they're $170.
$170
See
for
these guys after the meeting.
That's right. They'll be here. That's right.
You see us, I'll give you a lunch.
And that's the first week of April. So thank you very much. I also have a resource list on the table up here that came up from the SEMA meeting of locally available bee stock, whether that's packages, news, queens. The contact information is there, and then what they have available. So feel free to take one of those with you. That is our schedule of upcoming meetings, and we'll go through all of that. It's available on our Facebook page, or you can talk to us at the break. The break time for 101 will be at 7:15. So if you are in Beekeeping 101, now is your time to go that direction. Thank you very much for coming. Glad to have you.
All right. What we usually do is talk about what's blooming now and what's going to be blooming next month. Well, pretty much the same things are going to be blooming now and next month. There we go. That's what's blooming now next month. Okay, so what I thought we'd do is talk a little bit about about what we might think about planting in the spring for our bees, either starting from scratch or just adding a few things, and some things to keep in mind. First, what types of blooms do bees like? We need blooms that provide pollen and or nectar. Some provide one, some provide the other, some provide both. Natives versus hybrids. Bees love natives. Now there, of course, are some natives that are not quite suited for our honeybees, but overall, natives are what they like for several reasons. One thing is that hybrids are being developed as sterile. So we don't have any pollen or nectar, so the bees don't like them. The second thing is sometimes bees pay no attention to the hybrids and the things that are brought in from Japan or wherever because they're not used to them. They don't recognize them as a food source. Maybe the nectar smells a little different or something like that. So if we stick to our homegrown kind, it works a little bit better for the bees. Okay, this is a hybrid. We'll get there. No, I'm not turning it off. I need that. Turn it on? Okay, there we go. Okay, this is a hydrangea. I just wanted to show this to you. Those big pretty blooms on it, they're sterile. They are only there to visually attract insects. Now the blooms that are in the center of this particular plant do have pollen and nectar. Hydrangeas in particular are being developed more and more to be sterile, to have these big beautiful blooms that are no good to anybody. This in contrast is a native plant garden. You can see has lots of pretty colors, different types of flowers. This particular one is designed for bees, has lots of flat flowers on it. By the way, butterflies also like the flat flowers. They also want a place to perch. Okay, the next thing is they want to be accessible. We want to have a nice flat flower that the pollen is up and the bee can get to the nectar. We don't want to have a tubular flower for our bees. Now, I'm not saying don't plant tubular flowers because they certainly do enhance your garden. But don't plant them if you're looking for bees to go to them. We also want to plant in groups. Don't just plant a single plant. As we know, when a honeybee starts out in the morning, she's going to go to one type of plant. So if she has to go all over creation to find a second, third, fourth of this plant, that's wasting a lot of energy. So if we can plant several of the same kind of plant.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm struggling. In groups, this happens to be lavender. Then the bees would be very happy and she'd be able to get all of her pollen and stuff right away. Okay, how do I get plants? If I want to start out, if I have an area I want to develop, or if I just want to add some things to it. Two ways. Firstly, you can get plants, benefits, and bad things too. They're already started. They're easier to plant and care for. You don't have to worry about these little babies. And you can see what the final plant's going to look like, except keep in mind that the size that you get in the store is not necessarily going to be the final size. For an example, if you get hellebores, that's called Lenten rose. They bloom very early. The bees like them if they could get out early for them. And if you get them in a pot, they're going to be in a pot like this, and they may, have a nice kind of little round thing on the top. My hellebores are like this. So you can trust the size that you get in the pot. They are more expensive. If you're going to buy plants for a grouping, you're going to have to buy several of them. Also, they might be sprayed with neonics. The largest greenhouse around here does use neonics to spray. And so that's Heartland. And they do use neonics. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. Okay, if you start with seeds, take some effort to start. You have to get a few things, but you do have the fun of watching this tiny little seed grow into a plant. You need a little bit of equipment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. You do not need grow lights to start seeds. This is what a lot of people look at and say, oh, those things are so expensive. I start hundreds of plants for Master Gardeners. I do not use grow lights. I use fluorescent shop lights. Works just fine. Last year I had some salvia that bloomed twice before it got put into the ground. Because it would bloom and I'd say, oh, I don't want you to bloom because I want you to grow. So I'd pick all the blooms off and it would bloom again. You can grow many plants for very little cost. Oh, by the way, a window works too. And they're much less likely to have insecticides. If the seeds were treated with neonics, typically what happens is by the time the plant blooms, the neonics have dissipated. So you don't have to worry quite as much about that. Buy your plants, if you're going to buy plants, get them locally. They'll grow in our agricultural zone, and they are used to our soil and our weather conditions, and they're hardier and all sorts of good stuff. Two sources. Hamilton County Master Gardeners has a plant sale this year on May 18th. And then I understand that Cool Creek does do a native plant sale. It's not on their calendar yet, so I couldn't tell you when it is.
Janette, it starts in the spring and runs until October.
Okay.
It's right next door here, and they sell them during like 8 to 5, 9 to 5 during business hours when the nature center's open.
Okay. During the week, business hours, right here. Okay, if you buy plants, they're going to come in a pot looking like that. And as you can see, it would be, it's easy to dig a little hole and stick them in. You do have to care for them, at least at first, fairly carefully, make sure they have plenty of water, because if their roots have developed well in these pots, when you take them out of the pots, it's the end of all those little roots that take in the water. So you pull them out of the pots, and those ends get damaged. So you have to be careful and give them a little bit of extra care. If you start from seeds, you're going to start from something looking like this. These are, you can get seed kits at any of the box stores. They're all pretty good. You just have to take care of them yourself. We stop this message for a commercial message now. The second annual Central Indiana Seed Swap is going to be at the fairgrounds on Saturday, January 26, 2019. This is called a seed swap. You do not have to take seeds to get seeds. There are vendors there selling seeds. And it's very interesting. There are also classes that you can go to. Really, it's a great thing. Free admission. come and join us. Okay, when you get your seeds, on the front of it, it's going to have pretty pictures of what ideally these seeds are going to look like. At least the flowers. It doesn't generally show you what the whole plant's going to look like. On the back is the information that you really want. It tells you things like, I'm going to have to get closer because my eyes won't work. It tells you how deep to plant them. This one says 1/4 inch. These happen to be tomatoes. Space them 3 to 4 feet apart. That's when you put them in the ground. Harvest after 70 days after they go into the ground. It also tells you to start them indoors 6 to 8 weeks before planting outdoors. Our last frost date here is Mother's Day. It's an easy way to remember. It's right in that general area. So if you're going to start them yourself, you want to start them 6 to 8 weeks before Mother's Day. It says plant them 1/4 inch deep in individual containers, filled with seed starting formula, keep moist. Seedlings emerge into 7 to 10 days at 70 degrees. So if you have them in your house and you plant them, you should expect to start seeing things in 7 to 10 days. And also one thing you need to do with seeds is you have them in these containers and they're looking all beautiful and lovely, and you say, oh great, so you take them outside and put them in the ground and they go. Well, what you have to do is harden them off. And that is a matter of taking your trays outside for maybe an hour the first day, bring them back in from the sun. Next day, put them out a little bit longer, and so on. It doesn't take all that long. But they're not used to sun and they're not used to wind. So you have to have something to get those stems straightened out a little bit. Okay, it also tells you your planting area, planting time, and all sorts of good stuff. This one is a sunflower. These typically you would plant outside. You wouldn't start them in your house. You would go ahead and plant them outside after the last frost date, which is Mother's Day, and tells you how far apart to plant them, how deep to plant them, all of that sort of good stuff. So you're not just on your own when you buy a pack of seeds. And also most of the large seed companies will have an information thing online that you can go there. Some of them have, the little question thing that you can ask a question and somebody will come back and answer it. You want to start them indoors, and I do recommend you do this, particularly if you want a big swath of things, or if you're starting annuals or that sort of thing. They're fun. And you can get a seed start kit, as I said, at one of the box stores. Use an old t-shirt or other mat. This would go between the tray and those cells, the sections that you plant them in. The reason you do that is to keep moisture underneath them, but not have them sitting in water. So they'll draw the moisture out of this old t-shirt as they need it. Put them under fluorescent lights or a sunny window. At first, water from the bottom so that you're not disturbing that stuff on top. You just lift up one of those sections and add some water down there. Then after they start growing well, start watering them from the top. Here's why. When you water from the bottom, it sends those roots down deep, which is what you want. But if you continually water them from the bottom, you're going to have a root like that. You're not going to have any branches on it. So after it grows a little bit, if you start watering them from the top, the roots are going to start branching out. You may need, and I keep some vermiculite around to stop damping off. Damping off is a fungus, and it will quickly kill young seedlings. And it looks like a fuzzy mold kind of thing. And again, hard on. Here we go, and this is how they would look. Then just a couple more things. You see Monarda, which is called bee balm, and it is bee balm for bumblebees. I have never seen one of my honeybees on my Monarda, but I have lots of bumbles. If I were to plant one plant for bees, I'd plant coneflower, echinacea. Comes in different colors, it may revert back to its original, but it's good. These are the sources. I know you can't read that. I do have some sheets over here that I'll put out so that if you're interested in the sources. Kathleen Crow wrote an article for Indiana Department of Natural Resources. She lists all sorts of plants that are good for bees, trees, shrubs, annuals, perennials. Excellent article. Okay, that's it.
All right. Great to see everybody again. I put this presentation together tonight because I wanted to see how many people I could offend with one presentation. So if nobody gets mad and walks out, I will feel like I have somehow failed. Really, as beekeepers, I think we're all familiar with the idea that if you ask 3 beekeepers a question, you'll get 5 different answers. And everybody has an opinion, and some people are willing to die for that opinion. There's a lot of fact, a lot of opinion, a lot of science, a lot of pseudoscience, and a lot of, well, that's the way we've always done it in beekeeping. And so I actually looked through a lot of different resources in preparing this, and not surprisingly, there's a lot of different authors who have put together compilations of beekeeping myths. And what I did was I sort of picked and chose from a variety of different sources. Ones that I found to be interesting, or ones that are my personal axes I wanted to grind, whatever. So we're gonna talk about a few of them. Some of them are, I think, more deeply held in some communities than others. Some of them seem like a little bit of silliness, but I'm counting on David Holcutt here to jump up and call me heretic if I call something a myth that is actually not true. Oops. Why did it do that?
I don't know, but it does.
Okay. All right. This is one you hear every now and then. Honey is bee spit or bee vomit. You even see some people who sell their honey as so-and-so's bee vomit. Hey, do you do that?
I'm offended.
Yes! First slide. I forgot about that, John. Honestly, I did. I didn't think about it until I put it up there. So, but it is a question you'll hear people ask. Is honey actually bee vomit? One source even said they had heard people claim that it was bee poop, for goodness sakes. Well, it's not. It's none of those things. Nectar is stored by foragers in this little organ that's actually a part of their esophagus. Okay? And it's called the honey crop, and it has the ability to expand hugely. Okay? And when it's fully expanded, it can fill up a large part of their abdomen, actually. So it generally will look about this size. It will expand to this. Their digestive system actually starts right here, and there's a little valve that they're able to control that allows whether the nectar or what they're eating actually ends up into their digestive system or not. So when they're transferring nectar from plants back to the hive, this valve is closed off, and this crop is used just for transportation. Now, when the nectar is in the crop, they do secrete some enzymes in there that start to break down the sugars and start the process of turning that nectar into honey. Matter of fact, they have the ability to sort of bring some of that up. That's called trophallaxis, actually, when they bring that nectar up and they pass it to another bee. They have the ability to bring it up, actually dry it to some degree, put it back in the crop, take it out, dry it, put it back in the crop. And that's all part of the process of converting nectar to honey. But honey is not the regurgitation or vomit of bees. End of discussion.
What goes in then comes back out the mouth, so.
But that doesn't make it vomit. And actually regurgitation, you look it up, the dictionary definition is the contents of the stomach. It actually says that. Vomit or regurgitation is returning the contents of the stomach. This is the contents of the throat. So, okay, it's a fine point. All right. Here's a myth that I think a lot of people believe. If I'm a good beekeeper, my bees will thrive. In other words, if my bees don't thrive, I'm a bad beekeeper. This also is not true. The natural world is very hard on bees. Bees tend to go around looking for things to kill them, okay? And there are all sorts of things out there that we have no control over. There are viruses, there are agrochemicals, Varroa mite. Even if we treat our hives appropriately for Varroa mite, we can have bees coming into the hive from elsewhere and see our Varroa levels spike, and you might never know it as a beekeeper. Forage conditions change. We have dry years, we have wet years, we have hot years, we have cold years. The weather, all of those things can change. If you think about feral bees, wild populations of bees, and let's say that an area is saturated with as many colonies of wild bees as it can contain, okay? All the cavities in the area are full. They're all living in beautiful harmony with nature. If they're all doing well in the spring, they're all going to swarm, and they're all going to throw off a swarm, okay? Which is going to double the number of bees, okay? Yet going into winter, you're going to have the same number of bees as you start with. Feral populations lose about 50% every year. That's normal. So most beekeepers do a bit better than that, okay? Most of us don't lose half our bees every year. So the best beekeepers will lose colonies. Don't beat yourself up about it. I've said to a lot of people that to become a good, experienced beekeeper, you're going to kill a lot of bees. It just happens. It's part of learning how to do it right. All right, here's one you hear a lot. Bees prefer to work upward. Okay? Probably not true. If you look at bees in an environment where they're left to do their own thing, first of all, they will fill any kind of cavity, from a hollow tree to the gas tank on an old Chrysler in a junkyard. Okay? They will fill any cavity that they feel is going to give them shelter and security. They generally, though, will start at the top of that cavity. Here's a bee tree that's been cut out. Here's a closet that somebody had bees move into. They will start at the top, and they will build their comb down. Because if you watch bees festooning, they use gravity to support that festoon, and that's how the comb is extended from the top down. So bees don't actually prefer to work from the bottom up. They tend to work from the top down. However, it is more convenient for us as beekeepers to cause them to work kind of from the bottom up, top down. You know, we put a super on top of a hive, and they go to the top of the super and build down. And we put another one on top, and they go to the top of the super and build down. So we're kind of meeting them halfway there. There is another type of way to add boxes, and you don't hear it a lot, but it's called nadering. It's an old term, and that actually means adding boxes to the bottom of the stack. So in other words, if you start out with one box, the bees go to the top and build down. You lift that box up, slide another one underneath, and they continue to build down. You slide another one underneath, you keep lifting the stack and sliding boxes underneath. That would allow the bees to build from the top down the whole time. What's the problem with that? It gets pretty heavy. When you're adding that fifth super boy, you're lifting a lot of boxes. However, if you've ever heard of hive type called a Warre hive, that is how Warre hives are typically managed. So they do deal with that particular issue. But they do pretend to prefer to work down. All right, pick any hive type you want and say, that type of hive is more natural. Okay? Anybody who's promoting a hive type will usually throw this into whatever they're saying or writing. Fill in the blank hive is more natural way to keep bees. Well, that's kind of baloney. The native habitat of the European honeybee is a tree cavity. Okay? As soon as you take the bees out of that cavity and put them in any kind of a box, and not only a tree cavity, but a tree cavity that is maybe a mile away from the next nearest hive. Okay? As soon as you take those bees out of a tree cavity, put them in a box in a yard with 2 or 3 other boxes full of bees, we have left nature way in the distance. Okay? So, bees tend to adapt to pretty much any kind of hive. You can be a successful beekeeper with a top bar hive, with a Warre hive, with a bee pod, with a Langstroth hive, with a national or a British standard. They all work. Okay? It's just different styles of management. but none of them is really natural. All right, drones are useless, and you should chop them out whenever you can. Okay? Not really true. This came from the philosophy of intensive management, where drones just eat resources from the hive. They don't produce any honey. They don't do any work. So let's just get rid of them, and the hive will be more productive. Some studies have shown that actually hives that are allowed to raise a natural percentage of drones actually produce better than those from which drones have been carefully culled. But in addition to that, the genetic diversity of our bees in general, and we talk about raising locally adapted bees. Locally adapted means using the genetic stock that has survived well in this area. That relies on a good population of drones. And so having our hives raise drones not only seems to make them more productive, but it's also best for the long-term survivability of our local stock. Feeding sugar to bees is bad. You shouldn't feed your bees. Well, feeding sugar syrup is not as good as nectar or honey from a nutrition standpoint. It's not. There are things in nectar and honey that just aren't available in sugar. However, it works pretty well. Sometimes honey or nectar isn't available when the bees need it, like during a dearth. They may not have enough stores. It may have been a bad year, and they may need supplemental feeding for the colony to survive. They may be having a bad fall, and going into winter, you want to make sure they're strong. They may need supplemental feeding. Just because feeding sugar isn't as good as honey or nectar doesn't mean it doesn't have a place in good management strategies. It may not be preferred, but it shouldn't be completely eschewed as evil.
I'm going to say something this time again. Better than being dead.
Exactly. That's right. If you had to live on Twinkies, you wouldn't be very happy, but you wouldn't die. If a colony swarms, something is wrong. If my bees swarmed, something got screwed up. Actually, just the opposite. From the bees' perspective, if they swarm, they are doing great. Lots of food, population is up, disease is low, we're doing great. Let's send off another hive. Swarming is a sign of a healthy and thriving colony. We manage our bees to redirect that swarming impulse and to try and control that swarming impulse. Dave gave us a great talk last year on checkerboarding hives early in the season to try and manage that swarming impulse. But we're never really going to kill it. That's what bees want to do. It is a sexual reproduction of the hive, and you're not going to squash that. So what we try to do is manage it. In an urban environment, swarms can be a real nuisance to our neighbors. Getting calls from your neighbors saying, there's 50 million of your bees are, inside my car because I left the window open. That's going to annoy people. So we do try and manage swarms, but swarming itself is not a bad thing. All right. This is one you hear a lot. If you see eggs in the hive, you know the queen is present. Okay. This is usually true. It's true enough that I oftentimes will use it as a diagnostic without looking for the queen. However, I think it's important to understand that seeing eggs in the hive is one indication that the hive is queen right and all right. Okay? Eggs actually take 3 days to hatch. So if your queen tipped over today and you looked in the hive tomorrow, you would see eggs because she laid them today or yesterday. Okay? So it is possible to have eggs with the queen gone. It's also possible that you could have eggs in the hive that look like this, where you see little piles of them all over the place. This is not an indication that everything is all right. This is an indication that you have a laying worker, and things are very far from all right. Okay? So just saying, I see eggs, everything is okay, probably stopping a little too soon in the diagnostic process.
Explain that.
Laying workers.
Yeah, explain laying workers.
If a hive goes queenless, in other words, the queen is gone, and they are unsuccessful in raising up a new queen, okay, for a long period of time, some of the workers who have ovaries, but they are undeveloped, they will start to develop those ovaries, and they will actually, if some of them will become capable of laying eggs. Matter of fact, there are some sources that say that most hives always have a couple of laying workers in them, but they're suppressed. But anyway, so when a hive is queenless for a long period of time, a few workers will start laying eggs. They're not fertilized because they never made it. So the eggs would only produce drones. And they tend to lay them in clumps like this because their abdomens are not long enough to reach down to the bottom of the cell. So the egg will be stuck to the wall of the cell, or they'll drop multiple eggs into a single cell. And it's ultimately death for the hive because they're not producing any new workers.
How often does it happen? I've never seen it happen, and I've lost plenty of queens.
I've had it happen to 2 of my hives over the years.
It happened to mine this year.
Yeah,
I
okay.
had like a late swarm and it never.
They never requeen. Yeah.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I had this happen in a hive. The queen was actually in there, but she never sexually matured because after she hatched, it rained for 3 weeks, so she didn't get
So she
enough
didn't mate.
time.
So she wasn't giving off queen pheromone. And so it's the same as the hive being
Right, but
queenless.
so they were, like, probably a month later, they were making queen cups and were obviously getting ready to kill her. It was way too late. But so how long after they don't have a queen does it take them? I had the hive was full of drones. Like, so somebody had been busy.
The ones that happened to me, it was a couple of weeks. Dave?
3
3 weeks?
3 weeks is
3 weeks.
3 weeks is done.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a very difficult situation to correct. It can be done, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in another myth. But this can be a challenge. I have to say that the 2 of mine that became worker-laying hives, laying workers, I wasn't able. I had ended up combining both of them with another hive. I could not get either one of them requeened. All right, this is one I ran across recently, and it's a very deceptive argument. We should let our hives swarm because our swarms will go out and repopulate the feral colonies that have all been decimated. Okay, sounds great. Okay, the problem is there's a reason why feral colonies were decimated in the U.S. Okay, when the Varroa mite came into the U.S. in the 80s, okay, it decimated bees everywhere. Managed bees, wild bees, they were all just about wiped out. And because of that, we started to manage very heavily for Varroa. Well, wild bees don't get managed for Varroa. And so what has happened is the feral populations are down to about 2% of what they were in pre-Varroa times. Now, if our swarms, managed swarms, escape into the wild and repopulate those cavities that were formerly filled by feral bees, they actually now become feral bees, but they don't survive. Most of them don't survive a year. The vast majority of swarms don't survive a year. It's very rare to have a feral colony survive 2 years. So, in general, this is not the answer to trying to produce better feral stock. All right, it's another one you hear all the time. Bees who die headfirst in the cells have starved. When you go out in the spring and you look at a hive that's died over the winter, and you pull out the combs and you see a bunch of bees headfirst in the cells, beekeeper will look at that and oftentimes say, well, they obviously starved. They were in there digging for food and they died. That might be true. However, bees cluster in the winter. They cluster headfirst in the cells. Okay? So if the bees die while they're in cluster, they're going to die headfirst in the cells. That means they could have died from a viral infection, from Varroa infestation that just finally overtook the hive, could be some chemical that was stored in the wax or honey that they were eating, could have been starvation, could have been a number of things. Might have been starvation, but it's not an absolute. There's another one. A hive can only have 1 queen. Not true. The USDA estimates that about 5% of all hives have 2 or more queens. The way it happens most often is when an existing queen is superseded and the hive raises another queen, her daughter. That daughter queen hatches. She's allowed to go out and mate. She comes back and starts laying and will coexist with mama for some period of time. Eventually the workers will usually stop feeding mama and she will eventually starve to death and die, and daughter takes over.
Nice.
It's a hard world, isn't it? You thought you didn't get along well with your daughter. Okay? Okay? So in that situation, you can have mother and daughter coexisting. There have been cases where this has gone on for periods as long as a year. Now, there are other managed systems, too, where hives are managed to have 2 queens to increase honey production. That's a little different than a natural 2-queen system, but that can exist as well. Back to laying workers. Here's another myth. Laying workers can't fly. And this comes from the old concept of how do you fix a laying hive? But what you do is you take all the combs out and you shake all the bees into the grass. Okay, all of them. Shake them all into the grass, put all the combs back in the hive. And all the bees fly back to the hive except for the laying workers who, because they're laying, are too heavy, they can't fly and they die in the grass. Then you can requeen your hive. Well, the truth is laying workers fly just fine. They're not that heavy. A queen who's laying can't fly. She has to be slimmed down to be able to leave the hive with a swarm. But laying workers can fly okay. The reason it's thought that this is occasionally successful in requeening a hive is you disrupt the hive so much, you create so much turmoil in the hive that they may accept a new queen. I admit, I have done this myself. Okay? Did it work for you? Yeah, it didn't work for me, but I've heard people say it worked. Yeah.
Not dumping right here.
Yeah, walking a ways away.
Taking them 150 or 200
Right. And if they've been queenless long enough, most of the bees can fly. It's not like you have a lot of nurse bees who are too young to fly. All right, I got to wrap up here. I'm going to get behind schedule. Bees can't fly in the dark. I've heard that a few times. I guarantee if you go and open your hive at midnight and stick your head in there, you will find out just how well bees fly in the dark. They don't forage in the dark, okay, because they rely on solar positioning for navigation. There are some species of bees, other than honeybees, who do forage in the dark, but honeybees don't. However, they fly just fine in the dark. All right, my bees are happy, angry, sad. Put whatever emotion you want in here, okay? This is one that you hear a lot, and you see it even in a lot of literature, okay? I made my bees angry, okay? Or my bees aren't very happy right now. I just lost audio. Bees aren't people. They're not even mammals. They don't process information the way we do. They don't have emotions that are like ours. And when we attribute emotions to their behavior, we oftentimes can misinterpret and misrespond what they're doing. A bee doesn't sting you because she's angry. Okay? She stings you because of a response to protect the hive, but that doesn't necessarily indicate anger or being upset with you. The bees aren't calm on the combs because they're happy. They're calm on the combs because of other factors that are going on. So be careful about attributing emotion to what you see happening in there. Look for cause and effect, because they are very different than people. Okay, so we talked about a bunch of these. I've missed a whole bunch of them, but wrapping it up, how does this make us better beekeepers? We need to have a lot of different skills as beekeepers. We need to understand botany, chemistry, animal behavior, physics. Pick a science. It probably applies to beekeeping in some way. But to do that, we're drawing from all of these fields, and we need to use critical thinking skills as we evaluate information. It's very good. Okay. We need to evaluate critical thinking skills as we evaluate information that's given to us. I stress to people over and over again, look to multiple credible sources for your information. If you think mineral oil fogging is a good idea to control Varroa, find 3 good sources of information that tell you it is. I can point you to one, but that's it, okay? So look for credible information sources. And beware of the 3-year beekeeper with a blog, okay, who has the answers and is dogmatic about the way it should be done. There are many ways it can be done, all right? That's all I have. Thank you very much.
I'm Barry McNulty, and we're going to talk about our favorite subject for a little bit. There we go. Honeybee Health Coalition. I'm going to admit that I pilfered this off the Honeybee Health Coalition website. They actually encourage you to do it, so there was no problem in taking it from. Just a little bit about the Honeybee Health Coalition, who they are, what they do. Who are they? They're us. The coalition is beekeepers, researchers, universities, not-for-profits, governmental agencies, commercial beekeepers, backyard beekeepers, not-for-profits, seed companies, chemical manufacturers. So there's a wide variety of people that are vested in the concept of keeping our bees healthy. So I encourage you, strongly encourage you, spend some time. I kind of said something. I didn't want that. I would encourage you to go to the website, Honeybee Health Coalition. There is all kinds of best management practices on their website. A lot of the stuff we'll talk about tonight's in there, and it gets real specific on Varroa control and best management practices and hive maintenance. And it's really a good group and a good source of information. I'm going to slip through the videos. This is kind of a lead question and answer type talk tonight. What is a Varroa mite? Scientific name is Varroa destructor, and it's kind of aptly named Varroa destructor. It's originally a pest of the Asian honeybee. The best I can tell from my reading is that it jumped over from the Asian honeybee into the Western or European honeybee in the Philippines, maybe in the 1950s, 60s, something like that. Pretty quickly found a nice host in the European honeybee, and has quickly spread throughout the world. Last I heard, the only country that doesn't have a Varroa problem is Australia. I think they had a little outbreak of Varroa. They kind of quarantined that area and got rid of the Varroa mites. But pretty much any place that has the Western honeybee now has Varroa. And it's a parasite of the larvae and the adult bees, and it's as importantly as a vector of other diseases of our honeybees. True or false? Every honeybee colony in the United States and Canada either has Varroa today or will have it shortly. What do you think? True. True? Absolutely true. Every hive, every colony, that's just astounding. Every colony, it either has it today or shortly will have it. And there's really nothing we can do about it. It's part of our life now is keeping honeybees, is recognizing Varroa, recognizing that we have an extra member of the family, we're just going to have to figure out a way to deal with it. One thing is doing nothing is not an option. You have to have a Varroa management strategy. Successful Varroa control is proactive. Proactive. We have to be ahead of it. You can't wait with Varroa control till you got a Varroa problem. You have to understand the life cycle of Varroa. You have to be proactive. You can't play catch up with honeybees or you'll have dead hives. So the 4 interrelated population phases of Varroa, bees and Varroa, mite seasonal cycle. We all know how many new beekeepers? Over pretty much everybody in this room is a year or so or more, a couple of years. So you understand the seasonal phases, the dormant phase, the spring buildup, the peak phase in the summer, and then back down to the fall decline, back to the dormant phase. The mite population mirrors that same bell curve, but it lags behind it. How many times have we talked to people and they said, man, I had this hive and it was just fantastic. It just was a honey producer, and it was great, it was full of bees, it was my best hive. And it died in September and October. I mean, they just have this look like, I don't understand, it was my best hive. That's why. So the big populations, it starts to drop. The Varroa is just getting started. I mean, it's hitting its peak when the honeybee population is going down. So you get towards the lag phase in the bee population, the Varroa is hitting its peak. So I don't know how many times we've heard that. Because I've had this hive, and I've said the same thing when I started. I don't understand why this hive was fantastic. I got this honey off it, it was really good, and it crashes in the fall. Most likely it was Varroa. What percentage of mite infestation is considered potentially harmful? What do you think? Number of mites in a hive? 3%. About 3%. The acceptable, it's around less than 2%. Need to be really on your toes at the 2 and 3%, and you're in trouble if you are greater than 3. So I don't even like to get to the caution phase, honestly. If you get to the danger phase, your management strategy is not working. If you get to the point you're playing catch up at that point, you've reached an economic threshold with your hive where you're probably not going to make it, and you got to start considering what I'm going to do with that hive, because that's a pretty high mite hive. Why is sampling important? This is exactly what we talked about. You don't know if what you're using is working. You don't know if your management strategy is working. There's lots of things we can do. If you're in that acceptable 1 or 2 mites %, you can count on. You can do some non-chemical methods. You can do some drone brood removal and some different things, but they're not as effective as you go up the ladder. The more you go up with effectiveness is you also go up generally more with toxicity and expense. But you gotta consider all that. But bottom line is that you gotta have a management strategy and you gotta test. If you're not sampling your bees, you don't know what your counts are. If you don't know if you got 3%, if you're 5%, if you're at 1%, you don't know. You can't look at your hive and say, "Oh, I don't have any mites, I didn't see any." Well, you're not going to see it. So what sampling methods does the Honeybee Health Coalition recommend? Basically 2. The powdered sugar shake and the alcohol or soap wash. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I use a sticky board." Sticky boards they're not going to be accurate enough. This may be showing some mite drop. It's kind of a good visual thing to do, is to have a sticky board after you've done a treatment, but you can't use a sticky board to do your sampling. I personally like the alcohol wash method. Pretty simple. I think, who all does sampling? Who checks? If you don't check, you should. So these are just a couple. These are brand new, so they haven't been used. Real simple. If you've never done it, half a cup of bees. How many bees are in a half a cup? 300. So I never counted them, but that's what everybody says. Half a cup of bees. I use the alcohol method. Yeah, I sacrifice 300 bees, but to me it's worth it. My personal belief is I think I get more accurate counts with the alcohol. I use windshield washer fluid, winter mix windshield washer fluid. Put a half a cup in, get them off of a brood frame. Try not to get your queen, but that's what we're doing. Be real careful. Shake them all in a tub, get my half a cup of bees, pour my fluid in, and I shake probably longer than I need to. I shake and shake and shake and shake and shake and rain, see what I see, and I shake and shake and shake and shake. Because I want to really dislodge those mites out of bees to count them. So I might shake for a couple of minutes. I don't even know how long it's really recommended, but I shake for a long time and see what I see. Another thing is, unless your vision's really good, I see a lot of people with gray hair, you got to be able to see them. Is it a wing part or a leg, or is it a mite? So kind of hard to wear glasses under your veil, your reading glasses. I carry magnifying glass because I want to make sure I'm a little better at counting them when I started, but you got to count. So there's a big difference. If you need to know, is there 3 mites in there? If I see 3 mites, I'm happy. If I see 1 or 2, I'm like, oh, what I'm doing is working. If I see 9 or 10, I got a problem. So, but you got to check. So The sugar shake method, very similar. You use sugar, powdered sugar, put the bees in, put the sugar in, give them a shake, let them sit for a little bit, shake them a little bit gently because they're going to live, so they're not killing your bees. Let them sit for a little bit, shake them some more, then you shake your powdered sugar out in a dish, a white dish, and put water on, and you can count the bees. Might be just as effective. I just like the alcohol wash myself. True or false? Mite densities vary across colonies. All colonies in the apiary should be treated at the same time, the same chemical or non-chemical technique. What do you think? I mean, you got 10 hives, and you test a couple of them, and they're 3 or 4, and you go to your favorite hive, and it's loaded, and it's a honey producer. And you check, it doesn't have mites. You do your check, it doesn't have mites. You just let that one go because that's your favorite hive? Nope. You got to treat the entire apiary, same time, same product. Otherwise, you're going to get your mite bomb. So it doesn't take much. If you let one go or you're not accurate on what you're doing, you'll get your little mite bomb, and all the time and effort you spent controlling Varroa in your other hives, you're going to lose having a mite bomb in your apiary.
Question?
Yes?
I have neighbors that are beekeepers as well, and I know some of them do not treat at all.
They're my good customers. I'll sell them bees.
Okay, but are my bees endangered?
Yes.
Because that's what I'm thinking
Yes.
is that, mites jump from flowers and they jump.
And that kind of gets on to another subject, and I do understand people who don't treat with chemicals. It is a higher level of beekeeping to be able to manage Varroa without chemicals. You got to do brood breaks, you got to do requeening, you've got to confine your queen. There are ways to do it. It's difficult to do, and it's not a beginner's technique, I don't believe. But those people out there that are treatment-free, I hope, if anybody's in here treatment-free, I hope I don't offend you, you're not going to change the genetics and the evolution of the honeybee. You're just not going to do it. You're not going to keep change the evolution of the honeybee to be resistant to mites by not treating.
I think a good discussion to have with them would be, if they had a dog and their dog had fleas, would they just let the dog suffer?
And I understand. I don't want to put any more harsh chemicals in my hive than anybody else does. But I also don't want my bees to die, and I want to be a good neighbor. So if I'm not being a good beekeeper and my bees are Varroa bombs, and you're half a mile away, my hive gets weak, and your bees come over and rub my hive out, my bomb is your bomb. That's the problem. Now, if they want to be mechanical control, fine. I don't know how you would do it on a large scale, but if they got a couple hives and they want to do brood breaks and confine their queen and put drone frames in and remove them, there's some things that you can do, and there's some people who swear by it. But I think in general, for most beekeepers, you got to have a management strategy for drones. I've seen all the websites that they think that even putting a drone frame in is wrong, that you got to just let the bees do their thing. Well, I don't know.
And then I have another question. If the Varroa mites came from Asia, have they decimated the populations there as well?
They are have somewhat of a symbiotic relationship with Apis cerana, which is a different species of bees. So Apis cerana and the Varroa mite, and I'm not that level of an expert with that species. I don't really know, but I know that's where they coexisted for eons, and they have that worked out. So they jump species over to the western honeybee. The western honeybee didn't have a way to defend against it. So
the European versus the Asian honeybee.
yes.
I can help with that.
Yes.
The Apis cerana bee, the Asian bee, has a shorter development time whereas the European honeybee has a longer development time, which allows the mite to reproduce more in the European group.
Oh, they're in the cell longer.
In the cell longer, yes.
So if you've listened to Jim's talk on mite population dynamics, it's one of his best talks. We'll get him to redo it. He does a really good talk on mite population dynamics, on why a 75 or 80% effective rate with a Varroa tree is not good enough. Why you need to be in the high 90s and why you need to monitor. So he does a really good talk on mite population. Just that point that our honeybee really get, particularly the drones. We all know that the drones is just a Varroa, incubator. Yeah. Yes.
So, when I first started beekeeping, I was taught by treatment for beekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do the brood breaks, but it has nothing to do with the bees. It has to do with the chemicals of the honey.
Oh, I understand.
I'm asking if that's not a concern or if it is.
The chemicals,
Do the chemicals get in the honey?
if they're used properly, generally not. And we'll talk a little bit about chemicals. There are certain chemicals that you can use, shouldn't use.
Question.
Yes.
Has anybody used heat successfully?
I'm sorry, used.
Used heat to kill the Varroa? I was just reading an article on
Heat. Oh, heat. What like the mite zapper thing?
Yeah,
somebody's bought one in here. You're gonna give a talk on that. We talked about that. You're gonna give us a talk on the effectiveness.
I don't have enough data to really support that, but I'm going to say that it didn't affect it in the way that I was anticipating.
So that was the bee, did you buy the bee thermal?
Yeah, thermal bee industries.
But I also read that recent article too where it's the whole hive. It's not the thermodynamic thing. This is the.
That one was just for the Germany. That's like $900. But this one is a portable one.
That's the bee, that's the thermodynamic guy. So yeah, we should talk about that.
Okay, we're gonna go through these real quick. Tools for control, mechanical controls we talked about, drum brood removal, screen bottom boards. I think maybe at the start when Varroa, people thought the screen bottom boards helped. I think that's kind of went by the wayside. I have not seen one difference in my hive between screen bottom board and solid bottom board. I treat them all the same, I sample them all the same, and I don't see any difference. There may be, but I don't know. Drone brood removal, absolutely. Chemicals, some examples, apivar, formic acid, some of the softer chemicals like thymol. Just in summary, and we'll talk about chemicals just in a second. Obviously, it's a foe. All of our colonies have mites, are going to have mites. We got to keep that 3% or less. I think 3% is high. I think you need to be in that 1 or 2%. I think you hit 3%, you're in trouble. The Varroa mite bombs kill colonies. If you don't kill your colony, they might kill your neighbors. So you got to watch the Varroa mite bombs in your apiary. Resistant stock, mite biters and Russians and hygienic behavior help, but I don't think that's not our answer. Best I can see, we're not having long-term overall widespread success with mite-resistant stock. Mite-resistant stock still has a lot of mites. So what are we going to do? You got to be proficient in modeling. You got to have a strategy. You got to understand the population dynamics of mites. That's just bottom line. You got to have a strategy, and you got to test. You got to test before, and you got to test after. You got to see what you're doing being effective. Real quickly on non-chemical drug brood removal, brood interruption, requeening. You can cage your queen for a little bit in your hive, so your hive's not queenless, but she's not laying.
What's a little bit?
So you break the brood cycle.
Yeah, but how many days? Weeks?
Yeah. You got to break that brood cycle. You got to wait till the mites that are
patched out.
Kill your queen?
I usually kill my queen and I'll requeen myself.
Yeah, so then you have a brood with it.
But I had never considered just putting her in
Yeah.
queen.
You can do that. Some of the less effective, powdered sugar, calling old comb, I don't know that I've seen any difference on old comb to new comb on my Varroa populations. Apiary site, I don't, some of that stuff I think is minimally effective. Synthetic treatments, Apivar, very common name for Apivar is Amitraz. It's highly effective, well into the 90% effective. The route of exposure of the Amitraz in the hive is through contact. You hang the plastic strips in, they're impregnated with Amitraz. They go up and down through the hive, across the strips, and they spread it through other bees. Can you use it when you have honey supers on? Absolutely not. In fact, it's supposed to be off, I believe, 2 weeks before you put honey supers on. Treatment interval, 42 to 54 days. So in your management strategy, if you're using Apivar, you got to figure out when am I going to use it. Springtime's a tough time to use Apivar if you want to make honey. Disadvantages, brood loss, some mites develop resistance. I've read some articles, but I think for the most part, Apivar is still a very effective product for us to use. Cost per hive for a single treatment, $14.38 as of this week in Man Lake's catalog. So, not including shipping. So you take your package divided by, it takes 4 strips for a 2 deep hive, $14.38. That's pretty expensive. 2 older synthetic chemicals, Checkmate and Epistan, Kumafos. You won't see this used hardly anywhere, if at all. I don't know anybody who uses it. They're tough on the bees. The chemical accumulates in the wax. Fluvalinate, the same thing. Like I say, mites have developed resistance to it, and it does accumulate in hives, if you're asking. So they're still sold, but I don't know anybody who uses them. Formic acid, Mitaway and Formic Pro is the new one that came out. It's got a little bit better storage temperature, but it's still the same active ingredient of formic acid. Routes of exposure, formic acid is a fumigant. You put it in the hive, it is a really nasty smelling stuff. It kills the mites, the phoretic mites, the mites that are on the bees, and it also kills the mites that are in the cappings. It also can be used when supers are on. It's the only product I know that you can use with honey supers. Is that right? Can you use hot guard with supers? I wasn't sure. It's up here, but I wasn't sure on hot guard. I don't know anybody who's hot guard. The real quick flash treatment, 7 days. It's really effective. But what I found, you really got to watch your temperatures. So I think it's 50 to 85. I think it's the temperature range. You start putting in when it's really hot, you'll start seeing some trouble with your queens. So you got to be careful. You stick it in, you think you're fine, you have a 90-degree day or 95-degree day, you'll end up having some problems. You probably should wear some protective gear. You probably should wear some gloves. I try not to wear my leather bee gloves. I don't want to get that stuff on me. Probably, it says wear a respirator. I don't know if you need to wear a respirator or not, but if you get a big whiff of formic acid, you'll know you've got a whiff of it. Cost for my away quick strips, $7.48, not including shipping, per hive, 1 treatment. That's a 7-day treatment. You can use some honey supers wrong. So it's a good treatment. Oxalic acid. Mode of contact, action is contact. Methods is you can spray it on a package. You can dribble it between the frames of a hive. Most of what you hear about is using as a vaporizer. Time of year you should use it is the dormant phase. It does not kill mites in the cat brood, so it's only killing phoretic mites. So you really need to use it in the dormant phase when there's at or nearly a broodless condition in your hive. Disadvantages, corrosive, and so you must use a safety respirator. I don't, probably should. Try to use my smoker and see where the wind's blowing, because it will really get you. It's a real strong chemical, and I probably should say, yeah, I use a respirator, but I try to be very cautious when I use it. I plug my hive up good, and I make sure it's turned off before I go up there, but it's really effective, and what I like about it, it's cheap. I'm saying 50 cents a hive, maybe less than 50 cents a hive. Oxalic acid is not very expensive. You only use a quarter of a teaspoon per deep. So in a double deep, you use a half teaspoon of oxalic acid. That ain't very much. And it makes a big old poof of vapor cloud, and you seal them up, and it is really effective on the phoretic mites. And it's cheap. Vaporizer, several different kinds. There's all different kinds. I just have a cheapie that's heated with a glow plug. I think I paid $80 for it. Hooks to a car battery, and I can pretty much get 15 or 20 cycles out of it, maybe more. So it works pretty good. Probably not completely approved, but I just go to the hardware store and get the bleach. So you can get. You used to be able to get oxalic acid from Brushy Mountain, but they're closed. I don't know if any of the bee supply places are selling. Anybody know?
Amazon.
I can get it on Amazon. But Brushy had it and was the approved source of it, but they're out of business. So.
I just want to say, you and I share also a different vaporizer.
Yes.
It has a different
Kind of has a range where it doesn't get too hot.
Entrance. It was much more expensive to buy. We bought it jointly to share, but it blocks the whole entrance, so I don't use a ventilator or whatever hood when I use it because A, the whole thing is contained inside the hive, and B, it has a temperature readout. So I actually put it in and I start it, and then I go sit in my car, which is where I have it hooked to the battery. So
yeah.
I don't feel like I'm being unsafe, but the design of the vaporizer itself is somewhat protective and also keeps the bees inside.
But it was $250. Yeah, it was expensive.
So that's why we split it. So if you have someone that keep using it, it is a different.
So I just stick mine in. I just get a little piece of foam and I plug her all up and turn it on. Set my timer on my phone.
How long is the timer? How long is the computer?
I want to say it's like ends up being around 7 minutes for a double deep.
I do.
It depends on how cold.
I do. This goes pretty quick. It gets pretty hot, so it'll vaporize it in about 2 or 3 minutes. But I leave the hive plugged up for 8 to 10 minutes. So once I get 3 minutes, all the sublimation has happened with the oxalic acid. So I disconnect it, cools down, and I leave it plugged up for 8 to 10 minutes. And I usually do 2 at a time. I got 2 going, I got 1, I get the other one going. So it goes pretty quick, and it's cheap. It's really effective.
Then are the bees mad when you take that?
Yes.
Sometimes.
Bees aren't mad.
Sometimes.
Bees aren't mad.
They're defensive.
Mine were mad.
Essential oil treatments, basically Life-R and Guard, the active ingredient thymol. I can't find anything in the literature. Dave might help me on what the mode of action is with the mites. It's effective, but I haven't been able to find any of the research of what the actual mode of action of thymol is on the mites. It's in the 90% effectiveness, though. It's very effective. It's really effective as a late season. After you pulled your honey off in the fall, it's a fumigant.
It's effective because the fat bee man said it was.
It's effective. It's a fumigant. It is not effective as a fumigant like Mite Away Quick Strips, because it doesn't permeate the capped into the cap brood. So it's only on phoretic mites. It's naturally derived. Some of them have other essential oils in them, but the active ingredient is thymol. It does have a temperature range. Talks about some brood and queen loss. I think if you use it appropriately at the right temperature, you're okay. It's a pretty safe product and it's really effective. But it takes a couple treatments. APFR, $7.13 for a single treatment, but it needs 3 treatments. So, per the manufacturer. Some people may do less, but per the manufacturer, it needs 3 treatments. APFR, $4, and it needs 2 treatments. So, hop guard, it's made from hops, same thing we make our beer out of. I don't really, I haven't used it. I've seen people use it. It's kind of a black sticky stuff on cardboard that hangs down in frames. The bees get it all over them. They transfer it around. Dormant phase works best if they're dormant. Like I said, messy. That's probably my biggest complaint with it. I've seen people that get things stuck to their hands and everything. It's just a real brown, sticky, gluey type stuff. But it's supposed to be pretty effective too. I've never used it. That's supposed to be pretty effective.
Jim, have you ever used it? Have you ever used it?
I tried it. I wouldn't use it again, just because of it. It's like tar, you know. I mean,
Yeah, it's like
you get it on you. You're gonna get it on your hive tool. You're gonna get it on your, everything.
And it's not cheap. It's over $8 a hive for a single hive treatment. Other chemicals are not recommended. I don't care what you read on YouTube or what you read on the internet, all the YouTube crap you watch. Honestly, don't do it. Fog them with mineral oil. For Pete's sakes, don't fog your hive with mineral oil. It is illegal. Yeah, you can't. I mean, doesn't mean you can't do it, but yeah.
Somebody just posted that on Central Indiana Beekeeping page on Facebook that they were fogging with mineral oil.
Yeah.
I commented
So
on that.
they're watching videos on YouTube from like 12 years ago from the Fat Bee Man. No, don't fog your hives with mineral oil. Some people, they swear by powdered sugar, going in every week and dousing your hive with pounds of powdered sugar. You're not going to get the mite drop pouring powdered sugars on your bees like you do in a sugar shake. Because you're really concentrating them, you're shaking the bees, you're letting them sit, you're letting them heat up, and you're shaking them some more. You're not going to get that by every week going in, pouring a package of powdered sugar on your bees. Don't waste your time, don't waste your money. And the other things, obviously, it's like everything else. If it sounds too good to be true, probably is. Just stick with the research products that are out there that have been demonstrated either through the manufacturer. Randy Oliver is wonderful. Get on his website. He has great information on almost all this stuff. And it's a great resource. And the Honeybee Coalition, Honeybee Health Coalition also. That's all I have. Questions?
So we know that the Varroa is less successful on the Asian honeybees. Has anybody heard anything about, is there any interest in bringing the Asian honeybee to the United States to replace our Europeans that are struggling with the Varroa?
It's not as big a honey producer as...
So it's not as economically profitable.
Right.
You know, I think we were lucky in 1622 when they brought the honeybee here, but it seems like whenever we think we're going to introduce something because it's going to solve a problem, it causes more problems. So I don't know. It may be, but that's always my fear. Oh, we're going to introduce the Asian honeybee, and it ends up being an unforeseen ripple effect of something else in the environment. But I don't know. Bottom line, everything, you got to have a management strategy. If you're not testing, you got to test, and you got to stay ahead of it. You got to be proactive. You can't get to the point you got 3 or 4% mite load in August. You need to be figuring out what you're doing right now. What do? I get a warm day here in about the next 3 weeks. I'm going to put APFR in. That's my spring treatment for APFR. So I do a real early treatment for APFR, and then I come back and hit them with oxalic acid next fall. So I might try Thymol. I haven't used Thymol, but I might try it this fall.
When you do oxalic acid in the fall, are you doing 3 treatments,
No.
1 treatment? What are you doing?
No, I wait till I put them to bed, and they're at or near a broodless state, and I'm checking through the summer. So if I'm pull my honey supers off, or I'm checking before I pull them off, and I see I have my load, then I'm gonna treat right after I pull my honey supers off. But so far I've been pretty good that I'm in that 1 or 2 mite range percent. That I feel like I can wait until I'm in a broodless state to use my oxalic acid.
When was that last year? What month?
I think I was doing it late November when I was doing it. I usually do it. It's pretty cold. I wait for a decent day, so they're not just in a tight cluster. I don't, I kind of wait till it's a moderate temperature, then I'll hit them up.
I like 40, 41, 42 degrees.
So they're not flying, but they're not.
Tight, they're not flying.
Yeah. And I, as far as the Apivar, I got that from Dave Shenfield. He puts a single strip in the cluster in February. I don't know if I've read it anywhere, but it seems to work. He's got 2,000 or 3,000 hives, and it works for him, so I figure it worked for me. So, and it's worked for a few years. Typically, though, you're using your 2 strips per deep. So, if your peak population, you're double deep, you're using 4 strips.
And you can get Amazon sells it?
Amazon, I don't know if Amazon, but the bee supply places, Manlake, Kelly's, Baston's. He comes at I have some. Oh, here it is. Comes in 10 packs or 50 packs.
Baston's will sell them singly also.
They'll sell you single strips.
Yep.
Yeah, so I buy them in 50 packs.
A couple hives.
So.
And they're individually inside the packs, or they
Just little plastic strips. They're this contains 50 little plastic strips with a little tab on it. And you just drop them right down in the middle of the brood.
I mean, if you buy something that big, are the individual strips, are they?
No.
So they're not individually, so. So you don't need that many.
You can buy packs of 10.
Okay.
Which will treat, why 10? Should be 8, so treat 2 hives. Because you really need to use them up fairly quickly after you open. I wrap them up and put them in the freezer. I don't know.
You can put them in a freezer bag, and they'll keep pretty well.
I run mine through my food saver, so I kind of repackage them. So, but I think you're supposed to use them within a couple of weeks after you open the package.
Baston told me that they would last pretty much indefinitely if I kept them in a freezer bag.
I think the manufacturer says 2 weeks after opening.
Okay.
I think. But
It's got a seal that's not going to be able to off-gas.
Yeah.
So,
any more questions on Varroa or treatments or chemicals?
One more point too. If you are going to the bee school, it's a good opportunity. There'll be a lot of vendors there, and they'll sell a lot of different products. So it's a good opportunity to pick up those kind of materials.
Yeah.
How many people are signed up?
No, and yeah, as well as no shipping charges as well.
How many people are signed up for bee school right now?
Yeah.
Another
You
question
guys,
here.
okay.
Another question? Question?
And 2 questions, real quick. So typically you do 2 different types of treatment.
Yes.
One in the spring, one in the fall, but it's got to be different, like not doing Apivar both.
It doesn't have to be. I think it's important for you from integrated pest management that you're doing a variety of different things, from mechanical controls to using different chemicals different times.
Right.
But the monitoring is going to tell the tale too.
Yeah, and it, simply from the standpoint of it overall in our community, it helps keep resistance down. If you use the same product over and over and over, generations after generation, everybody's doing the same thing, pretty soon that product won't be as effective. So I try to mix up. Like I said, I've never used Thymol, but I'll probably try Thymol after I pull my honey supers off this year. It's real effective. I just haven't used it. I've been real effective using Amitraz and oxalic acid vaporizer.
My second question is, so with Apivar, like you're supposed to treat before you put supers on. If you did treat with supers on, like the honey gets eaten by the bees, but is the wax still contaminated, or was it just the honey?
It doesn't accumulate in the wax.
So
it is not, and kind of answer your question, it's not, there have been lots of studies, and it's like below detection limit in the parts per billion. It doesn't accumulate in the wax, but you can't have it on with honey supers.
So my question on that is, I leave 3 honey supers on for the winter just to give them some honey, and I treat it in the late, going into winter. So that's not been treated. I mean, how do you know which honey has been treated, which honey's not been treated, what they left over from before?
And if you started with wax foundation, I think that was just in our thing last month, was that wax foundation has already contaminants that you'll never have any control over because they've made it from beekeepers from 5,000 pools of wax mixed together.
There's wax foundation that has.
Unless you're using 100% virgin wax that your bees created, your wax has contamination. Now that's not to say that, well, all contamination is acceptable. I get that. I'm just saying, we're all dealing.
I think they've
I guess I
outlawed
was just thinking like this next
Kumafos
year,
in Europe,
I was not,
like
I mean,
20
last year I was
years
just
ago.
kind of like, well, I'm not going to eat it.
It's been a long
It's gonna
time
be
since they
hard, so I just
outlawed
went and
Kumafos.
treated. But this next year, I
And they're
went
still
and
finding
treated
trace amounts of
that wax
Kumafos
in
in
there.
wax foundation.
Well, you still buy it.
You can still, well, you can still buy it. Checkmate. People use checkmate for high beetle control. So it's real effective for high beetle control. It'll knock the bejesus out of high beetles. So, but it's a harsh chemical. So, the bottom line to answer your question is, it's your responsibility as a beekeeper, if you're harvesting honey for human consumption, that you know that honey hasn't been put on when you're using a harsh chemical. If you want to have the flexibility, use formic acid.
And you're planning to sell that honey to somebody else or give it to your family, then that responsibility is yours.
I guess the question is how can you ever know?
I got a suggestion for you. I got a suggestion for you. You want to keep it straight, you got a Sharpie, right on top of the frame.
There you go.
Boom, boom, that's what I do when I need to keep up with specific frames and stuff.
Any other questions? I know we went through that real quick. And, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I've got.
35 days,
Yeah.
then when you take it off, then you can put the supers back on.
Because my treatment time is 42 days. So I'll put it on in January. I'll pull it off, whatever 42 days comes out to be, 1st of March. Well, we don't have I'm well beyond my 2 weeks before our nectar flow. Brutal situation, there's less bees, it's less expense. I can use 1 super. If I have a real big cluster, I might use 2. Usually one strip.
So I mean, it's like the wisdom of your top deep gets honey bound, extract it out, but then don't let anybody eat it. Because
You can feed it back to the bees. Yeah.
Because I eat it. That's part of why I am.
Any other questions? And you're next up on the presentation for the my heat thing. I mean, we talked about that when you got it. I'm interested.
Last year was my first year of beekeeping, and I don't have a lot of data to offer, but yeah, I'd be glad to.
I just think as we as experienced beekeepers, and we've got a whole room full of new people in there, we gotta make sure that they understand that it's a responsibility for being a good beekeeper and a neighborly beekeeper, that they got a mite control strategy. So, I mean, that's really important. I don't really want my neighbor being the mite bombs for mine. I get too much money and time invested to have that. So I think it's important as a beekeeping community that we do that.
The reason I think I chose that was because I know you're going to have to use different techniques for it, and that's one of the techniques that says, it's advertised that it will treat undercapped fruit, that will kill mites undercapped fruit. So, but that's just one phase, I think, of integrated pest management.
Come to our sustainable apiary next summer. Mel Dessicone. He's got a whole process of treatment-free. It is a very intensive mechanical control, splitting, nukes, queenless. I mean, but he's very effective, but it is what he does.
It's laborious.
It's laborious, it's a good word for it, but if you want, and he's our speaker in our sustainable apiary thing in June.
The bee thermodynamic thing, though, also they talked about using it in the early spring to get everything warmed up inside, that the queen would start laying earlier. So there was more than just mite control involved with it. It had another. I just wanted to quickly, before I let y'all go, say please do sign up for the bee school. Thank you, Barry.
We got raffle.
We are. I just want to encourage you guys to sign up for the Indiana Bee School. It is a wonderful opportunity. They bring in a lot of very high quality speakers, and it's right here in our local area. So please do take advantage of that opportunity. So we're going to raffle, is that right?
We're going to do raffle.
Okay. Is there anybody else wants to buy raffle tickets before we do this?
They
did?
They already had opportunity. Let me just say, what we do on our raffles is we just draw a number. You come up and choose what you want. So it's in order of drawing. Number 813243.
243.
Yay!
Really loud.
I believe you. Okay.
Yay,
Take that
Bee
back
School, there she
to
goes.
Ann in the gray shirt back there. And she'll get
raise
you
your
signed up.
hand. And what? Raise
Bee
your
School.
hand.
She's gonna get, she got the Bee School. Okay? 813260.
260. What do we have left? This is Barry's. Is it Janette, the hat?
The hat or the shirt? And if you want the shirt, I can change sizes. Okay. 6815534.
534.
534.
Congratulations.
Great. So you got a shirt. What size would you like? This one is a.
Don't forget there's a resource list up here for bees for sale. Please get that if you need it.
Medium. Okay.
And also there's some catalogs left from Salem Plastics if you need to buy bottles for honey.